Good afternoon, and welcome to the Consortium of Indo-Pacific Researchers. I'm Indu Saxena, Senior Fellow and Chief Operating Officer at the Consortium. Today, we are going to discuss the topic U.S. Sphere of Influence and Beyond, Reshaping a New World Order. Please allow me to set the tone of this discussion. They say geography is destiny, but as we have seen in the opening weeks of 2026, from the shifting resource maps of Venezuela to the Arctic and maybe recently Alberta, Canada, geography is now a high stakes negotiation. We are witnessing a fundamental reshaping of the rules of the road for the next century. The new doctrine, new regions, and new institutions are replacing the previous one. We can name a few like the Donore Doctrine, the Gulf of America, and the Board of Peace, which are actively influencing and shaping the current geopolitical dynamics. We are moving from the liberal international order to the era of strategic realism. It is no longer about globalization, but I think it's more about supply chain sovereignty and transactional alliances. So there are a lot of questions while in the moving forward to the contemporary geopolitical dynamics. To help us navigate these turbulent waters, we are joined by distinguished panelists, and it's my pleasure and honor to formally introduce them. We have Ambassador Toro Hardy. Ambassador Hardy is a Venezuelan retired career ambassador, a scholar, and public intellectual, former ambassador to the US, UK, Spain, and Brazil, among other countries. Ambassador Hardy has authored and co-authored of 34 books on international affairs, former Fulbright scholar and a visiting professor at Princeton University. He is currently Honorary Fellow of the Geneva School of Diplomacy and International Relations and member of experts panel of the Rockefeller Foundation Bellagio Center. Welcome, Ambassador Hardy.
Thank you.
We have Dr. Hayat Alvi. Dr. Alvi is an associate professor and holds Khaled Chair in Political Science and International Policy, Auburn University at Montgomery. Previously, she served at U.S. Naval War College, Rhode Island. She possesses exceptional knowledge of the Middle East and North Africa region and the South Asian geopolitics. She has a renowned author and published articles in the esteemed journals. Welcome, Dr. Alvi. We have Dr. Satoru Nagao. Dr. Nagao is a fellow, non-resident at Hudson Institute, based in Tokyo, Japan. Dr. Nagao's primary research area is US-Japan-India security cooperation. His PhD thesis is on India's military strategy, the first such research thesis on this topic in Japan. He is a highly regarded scholar, recognized throughout the Indo-Pacific region. Welcome, Dr. Nagao.
Thank you very much. It is an honor for me.
Sure, absolutely. Please welcome again. And I would just like to announce that the opinions expressed here are solely those of the authors and don't reflect the position of the organization, the Consortium of Indo-Pacific Researchers or the institutions. So before moving ahead, I would just like to ask the first question, an overview of the United States, President Trump's foreign policy after 1 year. Just whatever you want to say about how the first year, the 2025 has passed. And if you want to skip these questions, you are most welcome. And please, I would request to limit your remarks up to 3 minutes. Ambassador Hardy, would you like to start, or anyone?
Well, I would say that it has been a shaky, difficult moment in history in which certainties are disappearing. The certainties we had for the last 80 years in the post-Second World period are completely being turned down. And I would say not for the better, definitely. Probably I would get more in detail when developing specific questions, but broadly speaking, I would say that it's a very frightening period. As Prime Minister of Canada, Carney just said in Davos, those who are not in the table are in the menu, and that's very scary.
I can jump in if you like.
Yeah, sure, please.
The word that comes to my mind is chaos. Some of the chaos is quite deliberate. And I see, in my opinion, a shift in focus on US national interests from being what they traditionally have been to the self-interests of President Trump and his family and his clientele, which include people in the United States and overseas. The second thing I see is, as the ambassador just mentioned, the structures and regional alliances that we've had for so many decades are being dismantled, threatened, and bullied. I can't think of a different word than bullied. And I think the way I see it is that it's analogous to Vladimir Putin's methodology and also his worldview. So I think in many ways, what President Trump's foreign policy in this second term has been doing is replicating, but in a customized way for the United States and Trump, replicating the operational handbook of Vladimir Putin.
And Dr. Nagabo.
In case of the President Trump's foreign policy, in the Japanese perspective, indeed, his foreign policy is not so unpopular. Not so unpopular. Because in case of the counter-China strategy, of course, there are many experts remark about US-China competition is under process of the de-escalating, but in Japan, many people do not think so. Because, for example, the amount of the weapon US sold to the Taiwan, or even if the recent military operation in Venezuela, of course, with all due respect, Japanese view is a strong America will deter China's action toward Taiwan. So that's why, indeed, simply said, the Japanese perspective, the current Trump administration is quite honest president or administration. For example, some things that he want to get, he clearly said this is the interest America should take, something like that. So he's honest. Sometimes the honest attitude is too rude towards the other country, but at the same time, honest is honest, and America is America. It's Japanese perspective. But the difficulty Japan will face is when we see the U.S. Policy towards Ukraine, the U.S. demand Ukraine the clear benefit if U.S. support Ukraine. So Ukraine gives the right to use rare earths in their country to the United States instead of the receiving support from the United States. So in this case, what kind of the, benefit Japan can prepare for the United States to get support from the United States is a matter. And in the past, because Japan could be the threat against the United States, military power of Japan is not needed for the United States. But now, so that's why Japan's benefit, benefit for the United States is providing a military base for the United States is enough level. So that's why it is easy for Japan to prepare. But now we need to do something for the United States to receive the support from the United States. So this situation is affecting the internal policy in Japan. So now the Japan faces election month. Japan will enter the election month, February's election. And so what kind of the party will win rely on what kind of benefits this party can prepare for the U.S. For example, Japan should increase their defense budget, and Japan should prepare the intelligence organization to cooperate with the United States or something like that. This opinion is more popular than the previous election. That is the current situation. Okay, I should stop it. Maybe I will speak the 7 hours from now, so I should stop it.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Nagao. So moving to the next question, I'm referring to Dr. Alvi, but if any of you want to jump in later on. So as our title of this webinar is U.S. Sphere of Influence, it's just for the concept and to make it clear to our audience, what is the sphere of influence? Could you explain it and how you describe President Trump's first year of foreign policy has contributed to the development of this concept?
Yeah, it's in the interest of strong powers in the global community to exert their power and influence through power projection, as well as through soft power means, to expand geographically a domain where their influence is effective. And again, that could be hard power influence using military and kinetic force, but also in today's day and age, the importance of soft power is very prominent in international relations, but especially for geopolitical actors who are competing for power, especially in a particular geographic domain. So sphere of influence is a specific geographic domain where a great power or a powerful country wants to exert its influence.
Okay, Dr. Alvi. So we should move to the next questions as to Ambassador Hardy. In the event of a Venezuelan President Maduro's capture, how do you anticipate the future trajectory of U.S.-Venezuela relations in the areas of such as power transition to a democratic party or more on trade and geopolitics?
Well, last January 3rd, while referring to the events surrounding Nicolas Maduro and his wife capturing Caracas, Donald Trump stated that the U.S. planned to run Venezuela for an unspecified period of time. When asked about who specifically would be in charge of doing that, he signaled the people behind him, meaning the American Secretary of State, the American Secretary of Defense, the director of the CIA, or his senior political advisor at the White House. As Trump stated in that occasion, these people, would be issuing orders to the Venezuelan government and exploiting Venezuela's oil resources. Delcy Rodriguez, the new president, he said, would remain in power as long as she does what we want. Moreover, he added that it was within U.S. rights to forcibly pull Venezuelan natural resources. The following day, on October the 4th, Trump told the Atlantic magazine that if President Rodriguez didn't do what was right, meaning what he wanted to, she was going to pay an even bigger price than Maduro. Donald Trump was no more, no less unapologetically establishing an American protectorate over a sovereign country and claiming to have rights over its natural resources. Actually, the U.S. will be directly selling Venezuela's oil and administering its revenues. And last week, my Secretary of State Marco Rubio testified before the Senate Foreign Relations Committee that the Venezuelan government will have to submit a monthly budget to the American authorities. All of this simply means that we are jumping back into imperial times. However, even then, imperial metropolis thought to present some kind of conceptual justification for their dominion. The French call it its civilizing mission. Japan talked about the greater Asia prosperity sphere. France even coined the concept of Latin America, referring to historical and cultural links to account for its conquest of Mexico during Napoleon III time. Trump instead has just asserted brute force, a kind of raw force that dates back to celebrated Greek dialogues, to Thucydides' Melian dialogue and Plato's Gregorian Georgian dialogue. While the first stated the strong do what they can and the weak suffer what they must, the second expressed that might makes right. Venezuela, indeed, has become ground zero for the Trump corollary of the Monroe Doctrine, the so-called Donore Doctrine, which asserts a neo-imperial American control of the Western Hemisphere. This closely follows the 1895 so-called only corollary to the Monroe Doctrine, referring to President Cleveland's Secretary of State, Richard Onley. Only's corollary stated that the United States was sovereign on this continent, meaning the Americas, and its decrees were law within it. It is extremely disturbing that we have jumped back 130 years. Obviously, then, besides deciding whether Venezuela should privatize, meaning Russia, China, and Cuba, the Trump administration interest is in Venezuela is focused on controlling its natural resources, meaning its oil and gas and critical minerals. The rest is totally ancillary.
Thanks, Ambassador. I would just move to the next question that is related to this, the Venezuela, but I would like to refer this question to all of you and beyond, so that we can have the diverse perspective on this. Beyond the oil interest, what other benefits the United States derived from its involvement in the Venezuelan situation? And the most importantly, how far it pushed or intimidated China, Russia, and Iran to do the business in Latin American countries? Dr. Alvi, to you, please to start.
Well, I don't see this as antagonizing China or Russia, maybe slightly so with China's presence near the Panama Canal. However, in the big picture, I don't see a gross antagonism of these events towards China and Russia. This is gross antagonism towards Latin America. And given the domestic immigration policy and the treatment of undocumented migrants in the United States, the vast majority of whom are Latinos, there seems to be an inherent hatred or animosity and antagonism targeting the Latinos. And this kind of undercurrent of white supremacy or white superiority it's not overt. I would argue it's very covert or very subtle, but it manifests itself in the way it is implemented. If you look at Latin American history, as Ambassador Hardy has just explained, the United States has not had those direct colonial ties or colonial occupations, but its imperial antagonisms of Latin America, of the Western Hemisphere. And we got to throw in Canada as well, and the way Canada has been treated, especially under the current Trump administration, underscores this mentality of brute force combined with supremacy, and it could be racial, it could be nationalistic supremacy, and a self-image of the United States that it is capable of doing anything it wants with impunity. Now, that's if you look at how Russia behaves under Putin, it's very similar. If you look at how China behaves under Xi Jinping, it's very similar. And I would argue that these are all litmus tests that China is very carefully watching with regard to Ukraine, with regard to how the Trump administration treats Latin America and the Western Hemisphere and Greenland and Canada. And also, I'm going to throw in how Israel under Netanyahu treats Gaza in terms of occupation and lack of pushback from the rest of the global powers. Why do I say that? Because if China determines that this is not going to have a major pushback, all of these events that I'm mentioning, then it gives essentially a green light for China to go into Taiwan. And who's going to stop them? I don't see the United States, especially under Trump administration, even with political rhetoric maybe being expressed, at the end of the day, I don't see the United States doing anything to stop China and defending Taiwan.
Okay, can I jump in? Can I jump in?
Sure, please. Go ahead.
Yeah. Maybe I should take charge of the Trump side to respond to this opinion, because in this case, the balance is anti-Trump side is strong and so no Trump side. So I should take charge of the Trump side. In this case, China and
Sure.
Russia, indeed, there are some Japanese view as one of the Japanese views. I should explain it, but in this case, in case of the Venezuela, of course, Venezuela's defense system is rely on the China and Russian system, especially the radar system in China. So defeating this system is a strong message to China, we believe, because, for example, China's radar the Venezuela have is the appeal point of this weapon is they can detect any stealth fighter jet of the United States 240 kilometers from the radar. So that's why approaching the American military intervention is anytime the Venezuela can detect, they said, at least China said. But what really happened in the Venezuela is they failed to detect it. So view from the military capability, US shows a very sophisticated one, and China's one failed to show enough military power. So view from Japan, this military operation is very welcome because US shows a strong military power and China failed to show enough capability. What is first one? Second one is the U.S. tried to bomb some country in the world, including Venezuela, Iran, now the blockade to Cuba, or the other cases, etc., etc. All of these countries cooperate with China and Russia. So that's why it's, if one by one the U.S. try to cracking down these countries, automatically China will lose the income or their supply chain of the oil or energy resources under control of the United States. So that's why on surface, the Trump administration tried to say China is good. I like the Xi Jinping, something like that. Indeed, what really happened is one by one, China is losing sphere of influence, and in the long run, China faces a very difficulty, or China is under control of the United States could happen. That's why some Japanese scholars expressed welcome in this case. So that is the part China and Russia related issue in case of the recent Trump administration foreign policy, I believe. That I should stop it because the time is limited. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Nagao. And you just raised the point where we can.
Well,
Yeah, Ambassador Hardy, you want to speak?
yes, of course.
Okay, sure, please. Go ahead.
I respectfully disagree with the first part of the answer of Dr. Alvi in the sense that there was no antagonism towards China or Russia. Actually, in the January 10, 2026 issue of The Economist, there was a very interesting article that stated that the Trump corollary to the Monroe Doctrine, which was the fundamental feature of America's new national security strategy, aimed at denying non-hemispheric competitors with the ability to position military forces or control strategic assets in the Western Hemisphere. And The Economist said that America's target was China. And I agree with that as this. However, if a strategic dominance is a national security imperative, and that was reaffirmed this week by the 2026 defense strategic document, if the hemispheric dominance is a national security priority, and China is the main intruder within the Western Hemisphere, then the issue is not military forces, Chinese military forces within the Americas, as there are any. there aren't any Chinese military forces in the Americas. The issue is control of the strategic assets. And the fact is that in addition to its huge oil and gas reserves, Latin America is close to topping the list of global reserves in critical minerals. These include, in the case of Latin America, lithium, niobium, graphite, copper, rare earth, etc., etc. Since more than 2 decades ago, China has been strategically and patiently investing in the exploitation, mining, and refining of those natural resources. Moreover, it built the infrastructure needed to move those resources overseas and within Latin America itself. Meanwhile, and within the exception of the huge investments and attention that the US had in Mexico, the United States was missing in action within all these processes. An absence which is difficult to understand, bearing in mind that the US historical obsession over controlling its own hemisphere has been proverbial. This absence, though, from its own from South America, basically, this American absence can be explained through the logic imposed by globalization, especially so as during globalization times, the US essentially retreated into services and left China in charge of much of the manufacturing of products that it needed. This responded to the notion of Chimerica, which was coined by Niall Ferguson at the peak of globalization, and that explained the fusion that existed between the Chinese and the American economies. Under this synergetic vision of US-China relationships, the redirection of Latin American commodities toward China made sense because there's a sort of triangulation between Latin America, China, and the US exists. Latin America exported its commodities to China, China exported its finished product to the US, and the US exported its services to both. Meanwhile, in the same manner in which during globalization the US offshored to China a substantial part of its manufacturing capacity, it also outsourced to China the long cycles, environmental problems, and the political risks associated with extractive activities, with mining activities. This again, under the assumption that both economies complemented each other. However, globally, Chimerica has been replaced by an emerging Cold War between China and the US. Globalization faded. Geopolitics came back to the forefront with Russia's invasion of Ukraine. COVID utterly disrupted global supply chains, and protectionism took hold in the United States. As a result of this combination of factors, we have been seeing these last few years an onshoring of American companies. Manufacturing indeed has gotten back to the United States, essentially high-tech, capital-intensive manufacturing. But it happens that high-tech manufacturing is dependent on critical minerals. On top, artificial intelligence demands energy, huge amounts of heat, preferably cheap energy. And although the US is a shale oil giant, its output is rapidly diminishing. The result of all of this being that the US is in need of natural resources that it does not control. Actually, America's high-tech industry has become a hostage to China's control over the global mining upstream, something clearly shown in the case of rare earth. Trump, being Trump, had an easy answer, an easy way out to this difficult situation, the Donore doctrine, meaning forcefully trying to get back the Western Hemisphere and its strategic resources through bullying, threatening, and as we saw in the case of Venezuela, even bombing. Venezuela needs huge oil and gas natural reserves, as well as rare earth and other critical minerals. By the way, was ground zero to the Donore doctrine. Who will follow? Greenland, perhaps? A few days ago, we were talking of Greenland, who, in addition to its strategic value, possesses a huge amount of critical minerals. Could it be Canada itself with its gigantic natural resources? Through this, that in Trump's might makes right wrong, everything becomes possible.
I completely agree with everything you said, and I do appreciate the Japanese perspective as well. I was simply saying that the direct antagonism towards China is not overt, right? It's not overt. And the reason is the kind of backdrop to the Trump policy, especially regarding Venezuela, is everything what you said, Ambassador. I agree completely. This, I think, if we step back and look at the big picture, these are the three big powers, United States, Russia, and China. They are competing for spheres of influence globally, but they're very protective about their respective geographic regions. And for everything, for all the reasons that you just explained, I think that was one of the big steps that Trump took in the context of that strategy or that goal of keeping the Western Hemisphere America's sphere of influence. So I see that connectivity that each power, Russia, China, United States, is competing against each other, maybe not directly antagonizing, but competing against each other, especially to keep them away from their own sphere of influence within their own region, but not necessarily impeding them globally. I don't know if that makes sense, but it's very hard to impede a great power globally. Not to say that everyone's on par in terms of great power status. The problem I have with the Venezuela scenario is that only the president has been removed, which a democratic liberal democracy does not do that. You're not supposed to. It's a violation of international law. I'm no fan of Maduro. He was a horrible leader for Venezuela. That goes without saying. But it's a violation of sovereignty to do that. Secondly, if we call ourselves still a liberal democracy, we still need to abide by the rule of law. And I think that's being eroded and overtly challenged and threatened by the Trump administration. The regime itself is still intact. The Maduro regime minus Maduro is still intact. The structure of the regime is still intact. So that's simply what I was saying, that I didn't see it as a direct, poke in the eye of China. Did it hurt Chinese interests? Definitely. Did it hurt Russia's interests? Definitely. But not to the degree of let's say, the analogy being the US invasion of Iraq and complete regime change in Iraq. I don't see that analogy in Venezuela.
Can I?
Yeah, Dr. Nagao, I know you. Yeah, please go ahead. Yes.
Okay, not directly link with as a two opinion. With due all respect, I will not do that. And but to understand the sphere of influence, I should say two things. The firstly, strategy of the Trump administration rely on the American history, I believe, because America's sphere of the influence has expanded through the three processes in the past. Firstly, Monroe Doctrine and the domination of the American continent. After that, in the World War I, World War II, their influence has spread the world. So when we check the logic of the Trump administration, we need to remember the one word, make America great again. But if America try to make the sphere of the influence to the great again, in this case, cause of the expansion is came from the Monroe Doctrine, World War I type, World War II type, but something like that is one of the cause in the history, and America can repeat again. So that's why currently America says the sphere of influence is they focus in American continent, but after that what will happen? The view from the history, their influence will spread to the world again. So, that is maybe image when we check the history of the United States. And so this is not just the Trump administration. If the American history, we need to when we check, in this case, indeed, the same course we can find it. That is one thing. Another thing is. Anyway, China is only country to take the number one status of the world instead of the United States. So that's why in the long run, U.S. need to defeat China. Because when we check the history of the United States, the 250 years, U.S. hasn't allowed any rival to survive, including Germany, Japan, the Soviet Union, always. So that's why if China rise and the U.S. start to say they are the rival, in this case, or competitor, any word is okay, but anyway, U.S. will compete with China and defeat China is the destiny of the U.S. history. So that's why in the future, that time will come. But just now, the U.S. rely on China's dominance of the rare earth or others. So now the U.S. is taking back some energy resources area for China. And this is a competition between two. So that's why just now G2, President Trump repeatedly say it's something like that. The two countries try to exist, but this is coexist like the US and Soviet Union. But in the long run, anyway, US need to defeat China. So that's why anyway, U.S. sphere of influence logic is maybe based on the American history. Indeed, this is not special only for the Trump. This is a pattern of the U.S. Strategy, I believe. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Nagao. Just want to make a few points. If we understand it like that, Dr. Nagao mentions because we have very diverse but balanced view of this all geopolitical dynamics. That is the for what US is doing is a traditional what US used to do, or the conventional type of thing that earlier in the Monroe Doctrine. And Ambassador Hardy, I just to put the one question, that was the Roosevelt corollary that was pushing the European imperialism out of the Latin American countries. And it's not like only the Monroe Doctrine. It was there was a Roosevelt corollary 1904. There was also there that was kind of thing, and now is the Trump corollary. And so what I see that if the 20 years we see in the past 20 years, U.S. liberal international order, what U.S. adopted that, did China take the advantage of that liberal international order and became the Leviathan in front of the world? And now US is not able to find the way to deal with the China?
Well,
Because, sure, please go ahead.
I would say that the issue is the liberal international order. It's dying, or just died, as a result of being pushed by China and Russia on the one side, by the US on the other side. I think that the speeches at the recent Davos meeting in Switzerland represented the formal burial of the 8 decades liberal international order, a period during which America's hegemony became fundamental in the creation and sustainment and preservation of a wide web of international institutions, system of alliances, and a rules-based international order. In Davos, Canada's Prime Minister talked about the rupture that has taken place within that system. The European Commission President asserted that the shift in the international order was not only seismic but permanent, and Trump himself argued that the United States was done in offering its markets and its military protection to its European allies. Simple fact is that Trump has joined the so-called revisionist camp, and jointly with Xi Jinping and Putin overtly aims to put in an end to the international liberal order, as I said. It has been argued that there are striking similarities between nowadays revisionists and the totalitarian regimes of the 1930s. Both represent predatory blocs wanted to put an end to a liberal order. Sadly enough, and oddly enough, this time round, the United States is part of the predators' bloc, aiming at territorial expansion and natural resources grabbing. Washington has become a threat to medium and small-sized nations all around the world. As Mark Carney graphically put it, if you are not in the table, you are in the menu. And Venezuela just experienced what being in the menu means. So it's profoundly disturbing that the United States, that traditionally was the defense against the international predation, has become a top predator itself.
Thanks, Ambassador. Let's move towards the Indo-Pacific, as Dr. Nagao has mentioned about the U.S. Strengthening position and the peace through strength. I guess President Trump's strategy. In the recently, as we all know, that recently released defense strategy, it states that to deter China through strength and build posture and sustain a strong denial defense along the first island chain. Dr. Nagao, how do you see the trajectory of US-Japan alliance in case of Taiwan contingency, given that the Japanese Prime Minister's remark over Taiwan in the last November? Do you think that the US and Japan are on the same page regarding the Taiwan contingency?
In this case, well coordinated. US and Japan has been coordinated well, so that's why there is no worry in this case. But at the same time, Japan's worry is currently under the President Trump, the US push is a little bit stronger than the previous government. Simply said, rising the defense budget and sharing the security burden. you should fight first. After that, the U.S. will support something like that. So that's why the Japan need strength, need to be strong more, and that is a very important thing Japan must do. Japanese believe, and in this case, so how much work Japan can do that? Something Japan is also, of course, worrying. But at the same time, operation itself was prepared based on the well coordination of the U.S. and Japan. And so not only just president and prime minister relation, indeed many level of the government coordinate well one by one. So that's why this plan itself hasn't changed, we believe. And at the same time, recently, so that's why Japanese believe Japan must change themselves. That is the feeling of Japan indeed. Because for a long time, Japan's pacifism is the interest of the United States. Because if Japan has a very strong military power, Japan itself could be the rival against the United States. So that's why everyone worry about Japan as a military country. So that's why Japan try to be low profile and keeping the smile and the backside of the United States. That is a good thing Japanese believe. But now the completely different situation. U.S. asked Japan to share the security burden. Strong Japan is their interest. If Japan will not work well, U.S. will not protect Japan. So that is, under current situation, Japan must be strong. So how to find the budget is only matter, but Japan has the will and potential to be strong. That is true. And so that's why Japan need to change their mindset. And indeed, not only the United States, Japan must change themselves. But that is the current situation. And the remark of the Prime Minister Takaichi, it is just a natural and not provocative explanation, I think. Because if the Taiwan contingency has happened in front of Japan, only 100 kilometers from Japan, Taiwan is, and the U.S. support Taiwan, under such kind of situation, if Japan try to be neutral, this means that Japan allow China to invade Taiwan. And if Japan will not support United States, even if the U.S. is fighting for Taiwan, in this case, this is betrayal situation. Japan betrays the United States as ally. So that's why there is no choice for Japan in this case. So Japan need to fight with China if China invade Taiwan. That is unavoidable for Japan. So, Prime Minister Takaichi's explanation is just honest one. And in this case, of course, this situation is coordinated well with the United States, I think. Even if PM Takaichi's remark is just a coincident explanation to reply the question from the opposition party. Thank you very much.
Thanks, and just a very balanced answer. Just curious to know, it's not a formal question, but it's on my curiosity, like the country, the South Korean leader visited recently to China, then Canada's Prime Minister Carney, and now I guess in February, German Chancellor will visit there. Do you think, I guess the President Trump will also visit in April. Do you think the Japanese Prime Minister will also visit China?
Yeah, of course, this is not comfortable for Japan indeed, because many leaders visit China. That is not comfortable because Japan and China, there is no possibility the two leaders can negotiate just now, because after the Prime Minister Takaichi's honest explanation about Taiwan contingency, China is imposing the one kind of economic sanction to Japan again. So that's why why under the current situation, Japan and China, the tension is silently rising, and simply we dislike each other. So that's why under current situation, there's no possibility the two leaders will negotiate directly. And despite this, many leaders visit China in front of Japan, and that is not comfortable for Japan. But at the same time, these leaders try to visit both China and Japan indeed. So after they visit China, many leaders come to Japan. For example, Stamara did, the South Korean leader did something like that. So that's why even if this is not comfortable, they try to respect Japan's will also. So that's why as a diplomatic attitude, Japan should not say visiting China is not a good thing. But when the president of France, Macron, invites Chinese leader to the G7, Japan clearly say this is not proper. So that is official movement Japan has done to the France. That is current situation. Thank you.
Okay, Dr. Nagao, thanks so much. And we are just running out of time because we have a lot of questions. But as Ambassador Hardy mentioned, that Davos speech, like we can find some more questions to discuss on the Davos speech, what Canadian Prime Minister Carney said, and how the pushback from the European leaders. So because just we can talk about the Greenland. In fact, I just one question that I just want to know if what your brief comments on the Greenland. What is the U.S. Greenland framework, and how does it impact the transatlantic relation? As I know that we don't have any European panelist here, but if and the Greenland U.S. Greenland push is just pushing the European alliance towards China, as Dr. Nagao mentioned, that Keir Starmer is in China now. So how is transatlantic? What is the future of the transatlantic relations? And Ambassador Hardy, you mentioned about Secretary Rubio's Senate hearing yesterday. I also heard that. In fact, watched that recording. Well, Secretary Rubio said that NATO needs to be reimagined. Just your short comment on these two questions, please.
I would basically say that the European record in dealing with President Trump has been short of abyss. Years of dependence on its partnership with the United States, internal divisions, and its preference for spending money on social needs over defense have left Europe spineless. Confronted to Trump tariffs, derision, and bullying, European leaders have answered by flattering his ego, lavishly honoring him, accepting totally unbalanced trade deals, and pledging to acquire American energy and agricultural products and to massively invest in the United States. In doing so, they have not only empowered the American bully, but sent a message to Putin about the weak-willed nature. I think that what Europe needs at this point in time is to follow the lessons of its two 20th century greatest statements, meaning Winston Churchill and Charles de Gaulle. From Churchill, it has to learn how to build a backbone. And from de Gaulle, it has to learn in building a European Europe. Their teachings are immensely relevant today because at the end of the day, Europe is going to be left alone, and every step that it has given to flatter Trump is a step that it's weakening itself. And I would say in relation to Europe, that all of that is being done precisely, they fear Russia. And I would say that the only thing that the Europeans have to fear, using Franklin Delano Roosevelt words, is fear itself. Because at the end of the day, its conventional military forces are strong enough to withstand any Russian invasion. And Russia's military has proven to be in Ukraine a hugely ineffective one. On the other hand, it's true that Russia has more than 4,000 nuclear warheads, whereas France and Britain, who are the two European powers with nuclear arms, just have jointly around 500 warheads. But that's the essence of a minimum defense nuclear strategy, the one that China used in relation to the United States for many decades, and that consists precisely at making prohibitive the first use of military weapons by the strongest power. If they have the sufficient retaliatory capacity for a second strike against the first use of nuclear weapons by Russia, then all this overkill capacity of Russia becomes utterly superfluous. Again, then, I think that the only thing that Europe has to fear is fear itself, and the lesson that it has to learn at this point in time were given a half a century ago by Churchill and by de Gaulle.
If I may,
Yes, please.
this is where we actually see direct antagonism by the Trump administration against Greenland, against Denmark, against other European powers, against NATO, and on camera the abominable behavior towards President Zelensky when he was visiting the White House a few months back. So this is where there's no shame for the Trump administration to overtly antagonize European leaders and countries, and especially in the case of Greenland and Denmark. I got to throw in, although it's not Europe, but also Canada, right? The language we've heard coming out of Trump in reference to Canada, in reference to Greenland and Denmark, and even NATO, we have never seen in history that kind of antagonism by an American governmental leader towards Europe, and especially European allies, that we have seen with this administration. I think the worst of it was how President Zelensky of Ukraine was treated on camera. So again, I see that as doing Putin's bidding in many ways, but with respect to Trump's own interests relative to the region.
Dr. Nagao, your comments, please.
In this case, yes, US and US allies should be coordinated well, and the Greenland issue, view from Japan, yes, okay, this is a little difficult. Yes, Greenland is a colony in the American continent. Americans say this is American, and the Europeans say historically this is part of them, something like that. So that's why Japan is neutral in this case, but Japan wish to US and US allies should be friendly relations. That's true. But at the same time, indeed, my personal view, but worry is this is a relation reflected by the domestic battle in the United States, because right versus left, Republican versus Democrat, something such kind of battle is reflected between the America versus Europe, because America is led by right and Europe is led by left, the American belief. So that's why this domestic battle Minnesota Wizards, something like that, is reflect to the yes, Europeans are left side people, and America must fight. Something such kind of emotional background is there in case of the Greenland issue, more difficult to solve. So that's why personally, it's maybe domestic situation and diplomatic situation should be divided in this case. Something like that, I'm worrying indeed.
If I just might add a quick footnote to that, but you never ever see Trump antagonize on camera or hear about it off camera Xi Jinping or Vladimir Putin. And he doesn't even badmouth them, especially Putin. So there is something there where he admires the strongman like Xi Jinping, like Putin, and has actually said that he admires Putin and the likes of Putin. So there's something there in his worldview about the strongman, if I put that in quotes.
But wait, in this case, I want to say is every time he say, I like you, every time, but. So that's why after he say, okay, I like Putin, something like that, so we should check the real action of the United States.
Yeah,
so,
but what are their policies, right? What are their policies towards Russia, for example? There's nothing antagonistic there. There's not even calling out Russia for invading Ukraine. In fact, we have reduced our support for Ukraine. So what kind of message does that send? It's not very comforting to Europe's democracies, right? It's not very comforting.
But the sanctions the US import. Can I?
Sure, go ahead. Go ahead, please.
The sanctions the US imposed Russia is the strongest just now. So that's why based on Biden afraid to impose a secondary sanction, which because it could affect the relation with the third country, India, especially India is very important for the United States. But now the secondary sanction imposed, this is strong and tough sanction against Russia. So that's why when we check the sanctions, Trump administration sanction is not weak compared to Biden are weaker. So that's why when we check the real action of the Trump administration, is this friendly for Russia? That is controversial. Yes, in Alaska, President Putin can visit. That is controversial. That's true. But this ceremony is arranged by the fighter jets, military. Why this is a welcome message? That is not welcome.
Yeah, I still don't see an overt challenge by Trump against Putin or Xi Jinping. We had the opportunity in the context of domestic politics of going against drug dealers and drug smugglers and drug traffickers, right? But Trump never called out China for fentanyl. He has yet to do that. He has not blamed China for fentanyl in the United States. And people are calling him out for that.
That's not true because the fentanyl case, the U.S. imposed to China the tariff in the beginning of this. After that, now, just 2 days ago or 1 day ago, maybe I can remember, President Trump clearly says in case of the fentanyl issues, China is cooperating and to crack down because now they are coordinating through anti-fentanyl operation. So that's why in this case, President Trump clearly say fentanyl toward China. And indeed, this fentanyl issue has clearly emerged when the Trump was the president in the first term, and now after that, continue. Now this is a frontline issue, the first year. But indeed, this is the issue. President Trump clearly blame China. So in this case, just a fact official statement. So not that. Action-related something I mentioned.
No, the rhetoric is very interesting because when the U.S. did the operation in Venezuela, they cloaked it in all this anti-drug policy. And that's when people were calling out, well, you're not talking about fentanyl at that time, and you're not calling out China, but you're going after Maduro for drugs. But that wasn't the case. That wasn't the reality.
Exactly. Dr. Alvi, Yeah, just I want to add that because China is the second largest economy. US can't behave China
Right.
like the Venezuela.
Exactly.
And China possesses the largest rare earth materials of the world, and that US has to go to negotiate in the last visit when the last meeting of the President Trump and Xi Jinping. So and in the US
And our
defense strategy,
economies, yes, our economies
and-
are intrinsically tied together.
And-
US and
and-
China, yeah.
Yes,
But-
and U.S. defense strategy mentioned that China, they mentioned the economic growth and the development and how they can, they have to compete, not, they have to deter China, it's mentioned, but not the confrontation. You know that they can't ignore. That's why I was just thinking how to deal with the China, because China is have a large amount of investment in Africa and in Latin American countries, in Europe. Look, there was an embassy issue between the UK and the China. You might know that there was a China is building a huge embassy, and there was some secret intelligence issues there. Earlier, the UK government denied for that approval, and now the State Karmer is there in the China, and they approved the Chinese embassy on that same place. So it's we have to make it clear that no country, even the United States, can't ignore China at this stage, at this point. Dr. Nagao, is that right? I guess, is that a valid point?
My perception is something like that. So thank you very much. Yes, just now they try to stay together, but in the long run, this is a competition. So that's why, for example, the US-Soviet Cold War continued 45 years. So just now, the US-Soviet try to stay together, but in the long run, they compete, and one shall stand, one shall fall. So that's why maybe the two faces is exist in the one competition or one coexistence in this case, I think.
Even that India is a part of the global comprehensive strategic partnership with the United States. India is suffering for the 50% tariff from the US, that not the China. So and we say that China is the adversary. Yes, Ambassador Hardy, please.
15 months ago, you had a good example when Xi Jinping stood firm to Trump's various tariff ruling and stopped it in the spot. China, of course, had a big deterrent, which were rare earth, of which a fundamental critical mineral, of which it accounts for 70% of its mining and 19% of its 90% of its refining. So what Trump needs is some backbone to push back. And going back to Europe, which you mentioned a while ago, Europe has also important deterrents with which it could push back to the US. To begin with, it has the so-called powerful retaliatory anti-coercion instrument that it can use against any coercive attitude by the US. But on the other hand, Europe holds $2 trillion of the US Treasury debt, and it's a market for $1 trillion worth of American goods and services. That on top of supplying US with essential technologies for chip making, telecom equipment, lenses, or aircraft, among others. So what is necessary is to stand firm against Trump continuous pull. China knows how to do that. The European Union will have to learn how to do it. And unfortunately, other countries of the world are not strong enough to do it.
Thank you, Ambassador Hardy. I guess, yeah, you want last comment from all of you, if you want to say. Yes, Dr. Nagao.
Yeah, one expert in Japan pointed out the battle between US and Europe is something like the battle between husband and wife. They argue each other very strongly, but just not divorced yet. so, that is one of the maybe explanations the Japanese expert did. And so because we are Asian, Asian cannot touch it because this is a battle inside of their house, something like that.
Yeah, you made it a very light, like for your after your last comment, it looks very light discussion. Otherwise, it was we are very concerned about what's going on, what's happening. So thank you very much, all of you, and everyone did a fantastic job, and it was a very intriguing discussion, a fascinating one, and I'm so thankful to you that you gave your time and this Friday afternoon. Thank you so much for your participation.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.